everyone. This is Lorena. I'm a trainer with Synergy Behavior Solutions, and I did title and describe this video with a little bit of clickbait in mind, and the reason for that is because I have been a trainer for a few years now, and I used to train a lot of puppy classes. And one of the things that I have noticed is that there seems to be kind of a thread amongst dog owners and folks who own particular breeds or particular stories they tell about their dogs, in that some dogs either need a particular style of training, which we know is not true. All animals learn the same way. But also there is this kind of notion that certain breeds, like working breeds or high drive breeds or like high energy breeds, that these dogs need sometimes seemingly absurd amount of exercise in order to be good, right? In order to be like healthy and happy. And so, hi Kristen, thanks for joining. And so one of the things that I've noticed is there's like two things that I want to talk about today in relation to that. And the first one is there are breeds, because of the way that we have genetically engineered, essentially, dog breeds, is that they're supposed to do certain things. So there are some dogs that can and will run for 40 miles a day. There are breeds that are designed to work tirelessly to root out critters, to herd sheep, to protect property, to protect livestock, etc., etc. Their breed traits are 100% a thing. That is not something that we argue about. Genetics definitely influences behavior. My argument, though, is that genetics doesn't necessarily influence the amount of exercise that your dog needs. That is absolutely an individual basis. And I am going to argue today that too much exercise is actually at the root of a lot of behavior issues, especially with these so-called high drive or high energy breed dogs. So one of the things that I want to talk about is this notion of people like to say a tired dog is a good dog. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think that a calm dog is a good dog, and I would argue that you do not need exhaustion to obtain calmness. A lot of people will get a working dog or a breed that is and can be designed to run for 10, 12, 20 miles a day, that will tirelessly, like literally until they pass out, chase a ball, these kinds of things, and then they will have their dogs do that thing, and they insist that that is the only way that their dog can settle in the house is if they chase the chuck-it ball for 3 hours a day, or maybe 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon. And people will say things like, I have a border collie, so it needs blank. My German short-haired pointer needs blank amount of exercise. My dog will not behave unless he does blank kind of exercise. I have to run my dog 6 miles a day because he is a blank. Fill in the blank with any kind of breed. Or your dog does that because he is a Jack Russell and he needs X amount of exercise. So not only do I think that this mentality is incorrect, but I also have seen it create a lot of the most challenging behavior issues that people tend to struggle with. So first I'm going to do a little bit of like some basic neuroscience type stuff that I want to talk about, and then I am going to talk about an upcoming class that I have specifically pertaining to this concept. So I also want to point out that I do have an American Staffordshire Terrier who is a high energy dog. This dog can and has hiked 12 miles with like 6,000 feet of elevation gain in a day, and she's still not tired at the end of the day, and the reason is for what I'm about to talk about in a minute. However, this dog now, because of the training that I have done with her, not because of exercise, can sleep for 9 hours while I work from home and be completely relaxed in the sun without having gone for a walk in a week, maybe. And she's fit and strong and healthy. So, what I want to talk about a little bit is this notion of like arousal. So a lot of people will use the term arousal, and I think that it has been misused, and I am very careful to use it in general, especially because I think it's now become this like substitute for words like dominant or alpha or something, and so people will be like, oh, it's just arousal as a way to explain behavior. But when we look at what arousal actually is, when it comes down to like neuroscience and what that means, is essentially arousal is just level of responsiveness to the environment. And so what we're talking about is actually an influx of hormones in the body And the hormones we're talking about are things like adrenaline, cortisol, aldosterone, testosterone. These hormones that are actually in our body in order to protect us and to save us and to help us to be able to do things like fight or flight or overcome obstacles, or actually to cope with stress. And so when we talk about stress, we're also talking about an influx of hormones. And often when we talk about stress as a society, we talk about it in like negative stress. So we're talking about distress. And distress, we know, is bad for humans and for animals in terms of their physical and mental health. So prolonged stress has been linked to all kinds of complicated behavior and mental and medical problems for people. And the same is true for dogs. But I think something that we forget about with stress is that all of the hormones that I just listed, adrenaline, cortisol, aldosterone, even adrenocortisol, and testosterone, these are also present during high-intensity exercise and during positive stress, which we would call eustress. So there is distress, which is like negative stress, which is like having to go to work every day in a cubicle, or for our dogs, maybe having separation anxiety all day, or dogs that are leash reactive. These are obvious forms of distress. We can tell when our dogs are distressed. But do you know what it looks like when your dog is experiencing eustress? And by that I mean good stress. So like happiness and overexcitement. If you've ever seen your dog chase a squirrel and they come back to you with what I might call crazy eyes, that is an example of eustress. I see a lot of dogs that are experiencing eustress. Hi Sylvia, thanks for joining. I see a lot of dogs that are experiencing eustress almost all of the time. And when we think about the fact that the same hormones are coursing through a dog's system when they are chasing their chuck-it ball for 3 hours, that are coursing through a dog's system when they are fence fighting with a neighbor dog for 6 hours a day, we're actually looking at dogs that have elevated and sustained levels of these hormones in their system all the time. So what often happens with these dogs that we call high-energy dogs is that we're actually creating this feedback loop where the dog never actually comes down from this high. So there's been a lot of studies and there's a lot of debate about like how long does it take these hormones to start to exit and empty and flush out of the system. The common number that's thrown around is like 72 hours. But this is true also for humans, in that when we experience distress or eustress and an influx of these hormones, which for us might look like things like increased heart rate, respiratory rate increase, blood pressure goes up, tensing of the muscles, and like more increased responsiveness to the environment. It's the same sort of hi. It's the same sort of physiological reaction that dogs have when they're experiencing eustress or distress. And so when we're talking about these experiences, we're talking about it could take up to 72 hours or more, depending on the dog, for those levels to even begin to come down. So for that dog that you think the GSP or the Jack Russell or the Border Collie that needs 3 hours of hardcore running a day before they crash and give you a few hours of peace, these dogs are constantly experiencing an influx and heightened levels of these hormones. That is not good for your dog. Not only is that not good for your dog's physical and mental health, it's also not good for your dog's behavior. So a lot of these folks are experiencing dogs that lunge and bark on lead. These dogs don't listen to them. These dogs don't come back when they're called. These dogs are experiencing separation anxiety behaviors. These dogs are destructive. They're pacing, whining, etc. These are dogs that are kind of addicted to that high level of hormone coursing through their system, and they don't know how to be calm. So I will say that it is not true that there's any dog that needs an obscene amount of exercise. I will also say that in my experience, the folks who stop doing that to their dogs, the dogs that run 10, 20 miles a day and then they stop, they will find that after a few weeks or months of focusing on calmness as a skill and fostering that physical and mental and emotional state in their dogs, and working on other ways of interacting with their dog that doesn't involve explosive, high-intensity exercise, that dogs' bodies are not designed, regardless of the breed, to consistently perpetuate. When we see that start to happen in this holistic approach to that dog's mental and physical and behavioral health, we get dogs that not only do many of their chronic medical problems start to resolve, because those things are absolutely related, but we also then get to see dogs that are making good choices because they're calm. And a calm dog is a good dog. So when I'm able to get my super dog aggressive and reactive pit bull to hang out in the yard relaxed on her raised bed while the neighbor dog is mooching about in his yard, which normally her instinctive response, her like natural response would be to go over and fence fight and try to tear through the fence, then what I get is actually a dog that I don't really have to control. I don't have to think about when am I going to get her 3 hours of exercise, and what other fun things can I do with my dog. So if you are a person who has a high energy breed, if you are a person who has a working dog, if you are a person who has a dog that can hike for 12 miles with 6,000 feet of elevation gain in one day and still be down for more after that, I highly recommend you start to rethink what your dog's daily life looks like and the role that exercise plays in your dog's life. Another thing that tends to happen with these dogs is something called super dog syndrome, which is just like for humans. If you were to run at full blast for 3 hours a day, you would be really, really good at running at full blast for 3 hours a day, to the point that you need more and more and more exercise to an almost unsustainable level to get tired. This is what happens with these dogs. They are designed to be able to take that kind of intensity for a long time, and eventually you will not be able to, what's that? You will not be able to meet your dog's exercise needs in order to achieve that behavioral management that you have been working through with your dog. And so since we as she's like, I'm going to turn off the camera. Since we as humans have kind of shifted, especially like in the United States and in countries where we have dogs as pets, we bring these animals that are designed for particular things, for very specific jobs, into our lives in the city. We work regular hours. They're not doing these things they were designed for. What other options do we have for these dogs? And incessantly chasing a ball or a frisbee, letting your dog run loose at the dog park for 3 hours and obtain high intensity and high arousal interactions from other dogs and other people, these are really great ways to foster and reinforce the behaviors you don't want to see in your dog. So I am teaching a class called Wild Pups, and it is specifically to talk about this and to really, in my hope, to really start a conversation and a bit of a paradigm shift about what it means to own these kinds of dogs and to have these dogs in our lives and how we can live and thrive with them and how they can have enriched lives. They can be fit, they can be healthy, and we do not need to be thinking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours of exercise and high intensity every single day. Let's start talking about how a calm dog is a good dog, not a tired dog is a good dog. Because if we can teach our dogs that calmness is a default and that it feels good and that it's reinforcing, then we can end up with a dog that's making all the right choices anyway, and we can have much more enriching relationships and experiences with those dogs overall. Like, our relationship to them is different. And so this class is going to be focused, it's 4 weeks long. It's going to be, each week is going to be focused on a different kind of activity that you can do with your dog, and on reframing what it means to have a dog that maybe was born or bred for a particular job, and how we can use those breed traits to our advantage to have really enriching and diverse and interesting experiences with our dogs. So we'll be doing things like talking about calmness as a skill and how to foster and maintain and build that skill in your dog, both in the home and out and about. And then each other day is going to be on a particular, like a sampling platter of different kinds of sports and activities you can do with your dog. So we'll be talking about scent work and what it can do for your dog. We'll be talking about parkour and fitness, and how fitness is important for your dog, but it doesn't have to be high arousal, and it doesn't need to have your dog being like pumped full of all these stress hormones that overall actually does not contribute well to the health of your dog overall. And we will be exploring these concepts in depth. And my hope is that we can start to shift the daily experience and lives of our high energy and really our genius dogs, these dogs that can do amazing things, and maybe we can broaden the diversity of their experiences and their daily lives to really start to utilize those incredible latent powers and tendencies in these breeds, rather than just doing an endless game of fetch until your dog passes out and blows their knees. So what does that look like, and what does it mean for you and your dog? Feel free to join us for Wild Pups. It starts next week, and I would love to have you. And please post any questions in the comments. This is a topic that's really interesting to me, and I like to geek out on it. I think that we can do so much more with these dogs than this like narrow-minded perspective of let's just make them exercise until they pass out. hello, Jean. You have such a great way of wording things. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's very kind. I think about these things a lot, so I try to make sure that they're relatively explainable and that they make sense. So if you have a high-energy breed, if you disagree with me, please let me know. I'd love to have these conversations. Hi, that's not how you get food. And I'd love to have these conversations with folks and figure out ways that that work for them and their dogs, because I want people to have positive relationships with their dogs, and I also want these dogs to still be living up to their potential and the incredible things that they're bred to do. That's it for today. That's just me on my soapbox, or rather on my scratchboard box. And Yoshi joined me today. She's really into these new treats I got, but she's making good choices hanging out on her bed, and I appreciate that. Have a lovely day. I hope that it is sunny where you are, and if not, then it will be soon. Everyone, please stay safe and take care of yourselves and your dogs.